Good morning, everybody. It's morning for me. I've got my coffee. Scarlett's sitting behind me on the floor. A couple weeks ago, we wrapped up Howard Goodall's Story of Music for Music Sundays, and so this week we're going to start something brand new. We're going to take a very first look at Sabaton, or Sabaton. I'm not sure how you say it. Now, this band has been requested going back months on my channel, and I'm just now getting around to it. It's actually really perfect for my channel, I think, because I do history and music, and so this is kind of like a merger of both of those. Now, there is another channel called Sabaton History to go along with their music videos. What we're going to do is we're going to watch the history video to go along with the video first, and then we'll jump into the music video. Now, I know this isn't going to be for everybody because I hear that their style of music is like metal, heavy metal. Actually, I don't know what the difference is between heavy metal and metal. And to be honest, I never have gotten into metal music of any kind, although I have heard some of it before. For instance, I've heard Master of Puppets from Metallica, and I feel like I've heard a few of their other songs as well, maybe some songs from some other metal bands, but I haven't like just purposely sat down and listened to metal before. So with that said, I can't guarantee that I am going to enjoy their music or not. We'll see. Roger's got his Sabaton, decorative stuff going on. We're going to be doing Primo Victoria today because today is actually the anniversary of D-Day, and I didn't realize that until I woke up this morning. I originally was going to do Bismarck first because that was recommended to me to do first because it's like one of their more popular videos. But I mean, this one has like 9 million views, so it's pretty popular too. And plus I just kind of wanted to do this for the D-Day anniversary. So if you're like me, you're not sure if you would like metal music or not, hopefully you'll enjoy the history aspect of this. I don't really know what to expect because I've never seen either one of these channels before, so this is going to be my very first look at it. So let's go ahead and get started.
At least among the Western Allies, it is the most often told story of the Second World War.
And it's also the beginning of the Sabaton sound. Primo Victoria.
Through the gates of hell, as we make our way to heaven through the Nazi lines. Primo Victoria.
June 6, 1944, a few minutes after midnight, a couple of British gliders silently touched down in Normandy near the Caen Canal. Moments later, all hell breaks loose. Shouting, the British commandos race towards the bridge, overwhelming the confused defenders with hand grenades and submachine guns. In minutes, Benouville Bridge, codenamed Pegasus, has been taken. The first phase of Operation Neptune has begun. Neptune, as part of Operation Overlord, was designed to storm the German defenses on the French coast and establish a beachhead to strike further into Normandy. A massive amphibious landing was to be undertaken to open a new front in the war against Nazi Germany and its allies. At 5 different places, the Allied forces would land: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Thing is, the actual landing at the shore was only to take place after a lot of other chess pieces had been moved. It was vital to the success of the operation that paratroopers and commandos would go in first, soften up the German defenses in the rear, and disrupt their communications. Brigadier James Hill had told his men before, "Gentlemen, in spite of your excellent training and orders, do not be daunted if chaos reigns. It undoubtedly will." Far on the western side, the 1st American paratroops of the 82nd and 101st landed. They were to protect the gap between Utah and Omaha beaches, and, like the British further east, would destroy as many of the German coastal batteries and anti-aircraft guns as possible. The Germans were aware that an invasion was coming. The concentration of force around the British Isles was obvious, but they did not know the exact date nor the location. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, in charge of the German defenses at the Atlantic Wall, had made repeated visits to Normandy. Now, if the invasion was to begin here, the Allies would find not one, but several obvious landing zones. So Rommel worked the construction companies to improve the local defenses. He ordered the flooding of fields, the tightening of minefields, and the creation of anti-airborne poles. But whatever he did, It seemed like nothing could ever be enough. The length of the
Wait a second, so those are poles to like deter airborne troops? They don't seem like they would do all that much. I guess it would hurt if you hit one, but you think you put like spikes or something on the top of it to, like, you know, maybe kill somebody or really hurt them if they fell on one? Because I've never seen that before. I didn't know that they had those. That's interesting.
But whatever he did, it seemed like nothing could ever be enough. The length of the Atlantic Wall was just too large, and the Germans lacked both the resources and the manpower to create a solid wall of fortresses.
Okay, so I have a question. I have seen, you know, quite a bit about World War II and D-Day, and I've seen these structures right here on the beaches a lot. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger like this. What are these exactly? What are they supposed to... Are they supposed to just stop vehicles of some sort from getting onto the beach? Because I'm not sure exactly what they're accomplishing. I mean, obviously they've got a purpose, but don't quite understand what it is.
Now on the night of June 6th, the German soldiers awoke to flak fire and explosions. Local commanders hung on the telephones trying to get any sort of orders or information about what the hell was going on. Was this the invasion? Was it a raid? Was it just another bombing run? Fate had it that Rommel was far away in Germany just then, and at the same time, most of the Wehrmacht High Command was either in Paris or basically anywhere except where the fighting was actually happening. Many lower-ranking commanders lost their heads, sending their local reserves in the hopes of stopping the invasion as it began. And at first, German resistance was decidedly lackluster. Many sites were guarded by men from Eastern Europe, often Poles, Czechs, or from the Soviet Union, who were pressed into service with the Wehrmacht. They had neither the training nor the will to stand up to the aggressive attackers. This allowed the first waves of paratroopers, the Pathfinders, to place radio beacons and Hall of Fame lights to mark the landing zones for the real attack. Soon, over 13,000 Allied paratroopers dropped from their transport planes. In small groups they fought, ambushing the Germans and attacking their barracks and patrols throughout the night. It was absolute chaos. Firefights were reported seemingly everywhere, and German officers had a hard time getting any assessment of the situation. In other words, the paratroopers were doing their job. The second phase could begin.
You know, for some reason, I had the impression that things went wrong with the paratroopers because I've seen the Band of Brothers before, and I feel like they did a few scenes where the paratroopers landed and then they were in the wrong spot or something like that. So it's good to hear that they were more successful than I thought that they were. I guess I got the wrong impression from Band of Brothers, maybe. Or maybe that was just like that little group that got put in the wrong place. But overall, it was a success. So sounds like it.
At H hour, a huge swarm of American and British bombers made its way to Normandy. Since April, they had intensified their efforts to pound the German positions into non-existence. But Allied High Command was not taking any chances. Once more, they would try to level anything the Germans had put in front of the landing zones, preferably the anti-aircraft casemates and high-caliber naval guns. RAF Bomber Command dispatched Halifax and Lancaster heavy bombers. The U.S. Air Force sent out Flying Fortresses and Liberators at the forefront.
Okay, is that little target logo, is that the Royal Air Force logo, basically? I've seen it before. I didn't know that that's what it was, though.
Mosquito bombers, Thunderbolts, Marauders, rocket-firing Typhoons, pretty much anything that had a cool name was to be thrown against the German Atlantic Wall. All in all, over 11,500 Allied aircraft would attack and wreck the German positions on the French coast this morning. The Luftwaffe might as well have not existed at this point, because there was no way of even making a dent into that kind of force.
June 1944, Allies Sabaton in the war. Normandy state of anarchy.
Then the final third phase began, as the guns of the navies opened up. Whatever the bombers had missed now took direct fire from 900 warships of the Royal Navy and 200 warships from the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. Under cover of their shelling,
Wow,
landing
really?
crafts made their
So the British Navy had way more ships there than the US did. For some reason, I would have thought it would be the opposite.
warships from the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. Under cover of their shelling, the landing crafts made their way slowly through the strong waves. Over 4,000 boats had been brought along to carry troops, tanks, and war material into the designated landing zones. Even duplex-drive Sherman tanks and waterproof Churchill tanks were to be landed. At around 6 a.m., the first thousands of American, British, and Canadian troops were about to close in on the beaches. The coast in front of them was burning and clad in smoke and morning mist. The Pathfinders had enjoyed the element of surprise. But this element was quickly fading. The Germans were now on full alert and began arming and organizing themselves. They set up defense perimeters at the beaches, manning the guns in the bunkers and resistance nets. Nearly all of their large artillery guns had been destroyed in the bombardment, as it turned out. Machine gun nests, the smaller bunkers, the control centers for the Goliaths, everything had gone up in flames. What the Germans were left with were little groups of men with small arms and mortars. Now, Hollywood and video games often portray the defenders as a large army of elite Nazi veterans, but in reality, this was the Wehrmacht of 1944. Much of the Normandy defenses were orchestrated by experienced NCOs, sure, but the men under their control were mostly teenagers or men over 40. Many of them could not have served in the army before because of health issues, but the German army had been scraping the bottom of the barrel. However, even a frightened recruit can pull the trigger of an MG-42 machine gun, and the Germans still possessed quite a number of those. With the advantage of the defender, they prepared to rain down 1,400 rounds a minute over the beaches. Utah Beach was, like most other landing zones, a long strip of sand, but intercrossed by dunes that provided a modest amount of cover. As the landing crafts opened their ramps, the men burst out. Immediately, machine gun and small arms fire smashed into their ranks. Despite the heavy damage they'd taken, many of the German casemates were still standing, and the German soldiers fired from their gun slits into the oncoming landing craft. Luckily for the Americans, the Sherman tanks had arrived as well, providing cover as combat engineers raced across the dunes, trying to blast their way through the barbed wire. To the east at Omaha, the Americans were not quite as lucky. There was no trace of the supporting tanks. In fact, 30 of 32 had sunk into the sea. And while most of the German defenses at Utah had been obliterated, quite a number of their resistance nests here were still functional. Mortar shells tore into the landing craft, killing a third of the first company outright. Then at 6:31, the first assault ramps went down.
I tell you what, with the Napoleonic Wars, I've been kind of, taken aback by just how brutal warfare back then was, because you would just fight in these lines and you would have to just take the fire. You didn't have the opportunity to take cover like troops today do. And this is kind of like the same thing. Not quite maybe as bad, but I can't imagine, just being forced to walk straight into machine gun fire and take it. It's still a horrible scenario. And I'm just thinking, imagine being an 18-year-old kid in that situation. A fun little, very quick story. About 10 years ago, I met a veteran of D-Day randomly in a restaurant in California. He was sitting at the table next to us, and he struck up a conversation with us. We found out that he was a very young, 19-year-old kid at D-Day. And he wasn't in the first wave of troops. He was in the second or third wave, I believe. But he was a lot of fun. And I kept in touch with him until he passed away a few years ago. Yeah, and he actually wrote a book. It's called The Private War of Howie Beach. I'll link to it down below. It's a really, really good read, kind of getting an idea for what it was like to be be a kid basically and be drafted into World War II from a small town in the United States. And then he talks about just his time, I feel like he was at the battle. I don't know if he was at Bastogne or not as well. He was in one of those like horrible like winter battles that they had in World War II, I believe, if I remember correctly from his book. But it's a really good read. It's not a hard read either, so I'd recommend it to you guys if you're fans of World War II, or not fans, that's a bad thing to say, but if you enjoy studying World War II, I'd recommend the book, and I'll link to it on Amazon for you.
As the Americans struggled to get out, the German machine guns tore into the packed groups of men, killing dozens in mere seconds. Bodies piled up in the landing crafts, and many panicked, jumping into the water, only to be dragged down by their kit. Still, the soldiers pressed on, out of the boats and onto the beach. The first waves were completely exposed to the German machine guns as the men ran over the sands. For the only option was to make a mad dash towards the end of the beach, despite their instincts telling them to lay down behind the smallest amount of cover. The NCOs spurred their men on as mortar shells screeched past them. All around them, men were shot or blown apart, but more and more American soldiers were arriving. There were simply too many for the overheating MG-42s to take on. Eventually, small groups of men made it to the beach wall, firing back at the Germans, while the engineers blew holes into the barbed wire with Bangalore torpedoes. The British forces at Gold and the Canadians landing at Juno fared better, as tanks and infantry arrived pretty much simultaneously. Facing only light opposition, they quickly pushed onward and beyond the beaches, under the cover of the Churchill tanks, which were armed with bunker-busting mortars or flamethrowers. They systematically cleared enemy strongpoints. Mines and machine guns were still deadly, but not in enough numbers to stop them. At Sword
Sounds like the British had it together a little bit better than the Americans did.
Beach, however, where the British infantry ran into a similar hail of fire from machine guns and mortars as at Omaha, 200 men had been killed or wounded in mere minutes. And the men were pinned down.
Which beach was
the British infantry ran into a but not in enough numbers to stop them. At Sword Beach, however, where the British infantry ran into a similar hail of fire from machine guns and mortars as at Omaha, 200 men had been killed or wounded in mere minutes, and the men were pinned down on the beach. Single 88mm guns blew the landing craft apart, and bleeding and burning men littered the beach. Several Churchill tanks were even knocked out. But even in all that chaos, the Allies made progress. They literally blew their way through and out of the German defenses. Explosive charges and tanks hammered the bunkers and casemates, and once one German strongpoint was overcome, the others were open for attack. So, like a house of cards, the German defenses fell apart. The men overran the German resistance nests, often not stopping to take any prisoners. They cracked the bunkers with high explosives, then cleared them with grenades and flamethrowers. The surviving Germans were in full retreat. By around 9 a.m., D-Day was looking pretty good for the Allies. So far, the Atlantic Wall seemed to be fully penetrated. The German beach defenses had been overrun and the major strongpoints overcome. From all sections, the troops were pushing onward, trying to keep the Germans from forming new defensive lines. But, although the Wehrmacht had been pushed back, it was not beaten. In fact, new battle groups were formed, and the Panzer divisions and highly mobile Waffen-SS were making their way north. The gates to hell had been pushed open, and if the Allies wanted to free France from the Nazi stranglehold, they would have to make their way straight through the German lines.
Through the gates of hell, as we make our way to heaven, through the Nazi lines. Primo Victoria.
Okay, those are big words, Joachim. The beginning of the Sabaton sound.
Yes.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, in a way, it is not only that album, but that was the first song where we started incorporating well, arranging the instruments that way.
Okay, so this guy is part of the band then. He's talking like he is. Okay, what's his name? What does he play? Does he sing?
Doing harmonizing the vocals the way we do, which is sort of like you would do in, I guess, Lutheran church hymns.
But whose idea was this? Was this your idea or a producer's idea or a little bit of both?
In this case, I am to blame.
Hey.
Actually, I remember we recorded the songs. This was, doing a demo back in 2003, I think, something like that. And I remember the look on everybody's face when I said this song would only have vocals as an intro, and they're like, "What?"
Oh, no.
Go, through the gates of hell, we only do have that. And they're like, "Yeah, and then you have delay and reverb." Like, no, nothing.
No.
It's like that. That's how the song starts.
Did you say like a Lutheran choir in 1527? And did you say it with this accent too, just like that? Just to really complete the picture. So.
No, I was thinking, I remember clearly when we were in the studio, we recorded the song, and we had done the lead vocals, but we had no harmony vocals. And we had never done anything like this before. We'd always do we call it fotbollskör in Swedish, football choir.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
You get everybody to sing along.
And everybody does it at once,
the same harmony, more or less in rhythm, in key, whatever.
But if you get like 8 guys, it works.
Yeah, exactly. I remember Per was sitting behind the control desk because we were recording this at night. We were recording with Tommy Tekgren at the time in the Abyss studio. And Per was sitting behind the control desk. Me, Richard, and Oscar, the guitarists at the time, were standing behind the microphone. And I showed them, like, now we're going to sing "To the gates of hell as we make our way to heaven, to the Nazi lines, Primo Victoria." And just like that. And they're like, "That's weird." And then "Through the gates of hell as we make our way to heaven, to the Nazi lines, Primo Victoria."
It's the 1/5.
That sounds...
Copy.
That does sound like the church chants almost from back like in the Middle Ages. It seems like. Yeah, that's interesting.
For the last one, we copied my lead, and everybody thought this is weird. And heavy metal song, you're gonna destroy this. Nobody.
Primo Victoria. This is like your. This is like you guys. This is like your song.
One of our most famous ones, actually. But I was so happy because I remember feeling it myself. I remember seeing Per, because once we sang them all, I told them just to remove all the other harmonies. So we only heard what we just sang. And then I told Per, okay, now just crank all harmonies up.
So they didn't know.
They didn't know. And then when the choir first comes after the intro, Primo Victoria, I remember Per sort of like, I don't know if he did like that or he just pushed himself away from the mixing board doing like that. And I remember myself for the first time, and this is quite an emotional moment for me actually. This is for me an extremely important moment in Sabaton history and in my life, because this is the first time I thought something was so good that we had done. That it was so good, it was, not only good to be what we did. It was not only good enough it's good for these guys from Fallen. This was really good, and it was actually as good and better than I would have hoped for.
To the gates of hell.
Wow, that is a huge crowd. I had no idea that they had crowds like that.
So, Primo Victoria, which should be Prima Victoria because it's female, we know now, sorry. But it was sort of means the beginning, or the first victory, or the beginning of the victory. And it's also, in a very real way, the beginning of Sabaton. Because I noticed how much I loved writing in that style. It felt like all of a sudden we had our own musical identity. We were not copying other bands. That thing that was new to us then is now, what do you say, a very, very, very big part of the Sabaton sound that we use today. That way of arranging the choirs, that way of arranging the instruments,
Yeah.
having the guitars playing the same sometimes, swapping into octaves, doing different things. A lot of it, the use of synthesizers even.
On the 6th of June, when the shores of Western Europe, Primo Victoria.
And then now you guys are gonna switch to a different kind of history on your next album, right?
Yes, pornographic history.
I mean, but you're not gonna do any research on any porno sites because that would be involve watching pornography. You
Yeah, that would be wrong. No.
That we don't.
We'll just make shit up as we go along.
See, that's great. See, that's what I.
gosh.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's a new slogan for the Sabaton History Channel: Sabaton History, making shit up as we go along. See you next time.
All right, he looks like he's a singer. I just recognized him right there. Okay. Yeah, Prima Victoria. Okay guys, so that is the history portion of it, and it's good that they kind of incorporated part of the song too, so we can kind of hear some of their thoughts and how they arranged it and everything. I don't remember from Latin if I guess prima is a feminine word, so that's pretty hilarious that they made that mistake. But we're gonna go ahead and jump into the official music video. I am going to put on the captions so that I can understand and we all can understand what they are saying. And of course, the links to these videos are going to be in the description, so if you want to go back and watch them yourselves, then feel free to do that. But I'm interested to hear this choir thing that they're talking about here, mixed in with a metal sound, so should be interesting to hear. So let's take a look at it.
Through the gates of hell, as we make our way to heaven through the Nazi lines. Primo Victoria.
Symbol on the tank. Great Siren. Okay, so that was my very first look at Sabaton, or oh man, is it Sabaton or Sabaton? I don't think I picked that up. I know they said it in the history portion of this, and I just didn't even pay attention to it. So I'm sure I'll you guys let me know. You guys let me know. I wanted to look up though. I meant to look this up before I started this video, and I didn't do it. But I wanted to see where Sabaton is from. Sabaton is a Swedish band. Okay, I thought that that's what it was, but a Swedish heavy metal band from Falun, Sweden. Most of their songs are written about heroism in war. The latest album, The Great War, hit #1 among the music charts in Sweden and Germany. Oh, okay, interesting. See, I didn't know if they were just like an internet sensation or if they had like legitimate billing in the music industry or not. So it sounds like they do over in Europe at least. But did they start online? Is that how they got their start, like putting YouTube videos up? Or did they just like start the more traditional way with making albums about history? I actually would be interested in watching like a documentary on them to learn more about how they got their start and how they decided to write songs about history and all of that. But anyway, that music video looked like it would be like a pyrotechnic dream come true. So many explosions in that. As for the music itself, you know, like I said, I'm not like a huge metal fan, but I kind of like it though. It has enough like melody and stuff to it to be interesting to listen to. And I feel like the church type harmonies that he talked about were like, I could hear them, but they were subtle enough where they didn't like, you know, pop out at you. And I really like the lyrics as well. Through the gates of hell, on our way to heaven. Like that is, like they said in the history portion of this, those are like strong words to say, and I think that they're kind of like really poetic, and I think it's a really good tribute to you know, the men who fought in D-Day. I think for Western countries, D-Day is like the ultimate part of World War II that we kind of tend to focus on a lot. It's very dramatic, actually, you know, what happened. And I know that like it doesn't really compare to anything on the Eastern Front, but it's still like a great history story, a great war story, just like even all of the planning that went into it behind the scenes. I find it really, really fascinating to learn about that stuff. So anyway, we're going to be doing more Sabaton. There are plenty of other songs for me to listen to from them. Now, this isn't going to be like a series that we're going to do every Sunday. I do want to do other types of music as well. So what I'm going to do with Sabaton is I'm going to kind of sprinkle in their videos between all of my other stuff that I do. Keep an eye out for their next one. I'll probably do Bismarck next because that was, again, recommended to me, but I just felt it was more appropriate to do this one today. And if there is a good documentary on these guys where I can just like learn more about the band, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you like and subscribe. And as always, Roger here, and I thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time.